stage. So good afternoon and welcome. It is a pleasure to be here with you. And 2016, early 2017 was the perfect trigger to the topic we are going to discuss: flooding, water stress, extreme drought in other parts of the country, fires. The province of Buenos Aires, 10 different districts were affected by fires, 9 in La Pampa, 4 in Rio Negro. These are all provinces in Argentina. Big losses in cattle farming and in dairy farming. And if we consider the budget allocated in the federal budget to agricultural emergencies, is only 500 million pesos. If we compare that to what different media published early this year that were connecting losses only in La Pampa due to fires to 1,000 million pesos. So something is wrong here. We cannot make ends meet. Developed countries globally decide how much to allocate to emergencies, and most of the money allocated goes to prevention, and some of it to the emergencies that will always happen. But prevention is crucial, and we have zero for prevention here. So let me refer back to 500 million pesos in the federal budget. That was allocated in the 90s when 500 million pesos was equivalent to $500 million. And we keep the same amount, even though our peso has depreciated a lot. So with that amount of money, we cannot help anybody in an emergency. Also, emergencies means helping people after something has happened. So we have to develop prevention policies, probably insurances, but we will open the floor to our speakers. So we have an hour and a half to listen to different people. We will have a Q&A session, of course. And let me please ask you, if you have a question, try not to be so personal and to refer so much about lack of infrastructure. We have different panels, different workshops that concentrate on that topic. So here, please, let us refer to risk management. Okay, Lisandro, please. So thank you for your introduction. And now let me introduce Sandra Occhiuzzi. She's an ag engineer, graduated in the University of Buenos Aires with postgrad studies in the University of Buenos Aires too, and since 2016 she coordinates the Agricultural Risk Management Office in the ministry at federal level. So this is the first presentation of this panel. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. Aapresid. This is a very significant event, and it's very important to include this topic that is tough in one specific panel. So thank you for that. Of course, the agro-industrial system in Argentina has significant international opportunities. However, to become the supermarket of the world, we are exposed and threatened by climate events and market issues that make it really difficult to take advantage of all the opportunities we currently have. What can we do? What can risk management policies do? What are the challenges we have to face? I believe the main challenge is to understand we live in a very complex world where we face many uncertainties and uncertain contexts in the short, mid, and long term. Uncertainty about commodities prices in international markets, about fiscal policies in Argentina and in our competitor countries, and also uncertainties that have a big impact on production sustainability, on farmers' sustainability, on rural family sustainability, and on food safety. They also have an indirect impact on costs, because climate events, of course, have an impact on the price of the products we all consume. Not only us who are directly or indirectly tied to agriculture. So what can we do? We should try to limit uncertainties of threats and their impact. The ministry is working the ministry has got two strong working lines: to produce more and better information for decision making, and also developing response instruments to respond to climate threats. The other working line is to reduce the variability of production practices. We try to foster productive capabilities or skills in terms of rural public infrastructure, and also the generation, dissemination, and transfer of technology to make productive systems more efficient. This package is what we call comprehensive risk management, which is a very wide concept, much wider than insurances. A pillar is strengthening information systems for risk management. The public sector is focusing on integrating climate information from private and public sources, not only integrating this information in one network, because we believe quality information of this kind will let us work on early alert systems so that farmers can make better decisions. We should be more efficient in monitoring the growing season, and this will give farmers instruments developed by the scientific and technological community. We are also working on what we call apt arable areas, in mapping these areas And we are developing GIS system, geographical information systems, to assess risks. These type of systems are being used by all research institutions in the world because it will also use spatial information. As Enrique mentioned, investments to mitigate risks are very important. This is yet another pillar of risk management. This project is being developed by the ministry, funded by the World Bank. Provinces will be part of it. The idea is to have each province, based on audits, present or submit a project of what to do in their own area, better access to rural roads, develop irrigation system, produce technologies to increase production systems resilience, and work on training and technical assistance for technology adoption. There's a very significant role to play here by the government and by farmers, because they both have to adopt technologies to reduce the impact of climate events. The government can foster adoption, but this is something we have to work together with INTA and farmers' representatives to decide which technologies should be applied. The third pillar is, of course, strengthening response instruments, emergency response instruments, through risk transfer mechanisms. We are betting on a better emergency response, on promoting climate insurance coverage, traditional or non-conventional, such as insurances, derivatives, and develop pilot tests of different types of insurances to trigger future instruments, even though the state is not part of them. And of course, to work with the private sector to strengthen institutions and to develop and disseminate this new type of insurances. There are many regions, many crops that have no coverage. So finding these programs, developing them, is something that should be done in a public-private partnership context. This is not an ideal project. This is not a theoretical idea. This is something that wants to implement and foster actions that are already being implemented. Let me mention some of them. This is what the ministry is currently doing. We have launched the CVMET, which is an integration and validation system of meteorological information that integrates different public and private networks to have public dissemination of the measurements and to provide data quality control. This system currently integrates 4 networks, 2 private, 2 public in nature. We have the Córdoba Board of Trade Stations, Entre Rios Board of Trade Stations, the Corrientes Production Ministry stations, and climate stations from the National Meteorological Service. We are trying to integrate INTA and other boards of trades that also have their private networks and are interested of being part of the system. You know that private climate networks have grown a lot in recent years. Not all of these networks are working properly, have good maintenance service, so we have to use them and be sure of the quality of the data they provide in order to use them in an emergency response system. The advantages of having better integrated stations relate to monitoring the climate conditions along the growing season. In the long run, we aimed at having a more robust database to have a better risk calculation, to have an estimate of impacts on agriculture. Today, everybody talks about climate change, but few talk about proper maintenance of climate stations. When we have a station 30, 40-year-old and doesn't provide data anymore, does not contribute to climate statistics, so it doesn't fit within simulation models. We have to be aware that in order to measure climate change in the long term, we need to have a robust network of stations with proper maintenance. We are also working on this other project. We are trying to contribute to land administration. These are what we call aptitude or suitability mapping. These maps should be used for land administration purposes. They do not set limitations. They do not tell farmers not to produce in certain places. They are aimed at better setting policies for land administration. I think this is very important for insurance companies for premium determination in certain areas. This is something we are doing based on FAO methodologies that includes thermal, water and soil limitations. We have divided areas based on their suitability, optimal, marginal, suboptimal, or suitable for irrigation. This is important because it will be also used for the Irrigation National Plan. So far, we've used it for corn, but we are also working on wheat. The methodology is very similar, and this information will be available to all of you in not very long. We are working with insurance companies in a new project for climate change adoption in what we call an ORCAR coverage in Corrientes and in the Salad Bowl in the province of Corrientes. I think this is the first insurance that will provide coverage to family production. We've been working with the private sector. The premium is subsidized by the United Nations Special Fund, and it covers hail, wind, and frost for small orchards that work in greenhouses. We've been implementing this for 2 years. More than 700 producers received the benefits, and we are very happy with the results. There are great expectations about this program, and we believe we can bring it to other areas in other provinces. We are also working on risk transfer instruments. This is we are drafting a law of what we call the agriculture insurance. Many farmers' representatives and insurance companies' representatives will be invited to our discussions. We are working on drought coverage and flood coverage for corn. We are developing a pilot plan, more than a pilot plan, a plan in a pilot area. Probably this will be implemented somewhere in the province of Buenos Aires. We are updating some technical calculation, which is to provide coverage for forage. So, in a very short period of time, I tried to explain what the ministry is doing on risk management. Thank you very much.
We thank Sandra Occhiuzzi for her presentation. I will now give the floor to the next speaker, Carlos Comas, Farming and Forestry Risk Coverage from La Segunda. He graduated from Rosario University, and he represents ADIRA, and he's a treasurer of ALASA, Latin American Association for the Development of Farming Insurance. So we give the floor to Mr. Carlos Comas, Manager of Farming Risks of La Segunda, and this will be the second presentation in this session. Good afternoon. On behalf of ADIRA, insurance companies of inland Argentina, we'd like to thank Aapresid for inviting us to participate in this panel. This is a very important opportunity for us because the development of farming insurance in Argentina has to change. I will now share with you what climate risk management means. I will talk about the way it is tackled in Argentina and in Latin America, and we will be able to make comparisons, to draw conclusions about this. We'll talk about climate risk management for farming organizations. First, I'd like to talk about the market. In Argentina, there are 25 insurance companies offering climate risk coverage. 5 companies, including La Segunda, represent 70%, have a 70% market share. Market share of all the premiums in the market. How many farmers take insurance for climate risks in Argentina? Well, 50% of the arable land of an acreage is insured. This is an important indicator for Latin America. The main coverage, and this is one of the shortages of this system, is that 99.5% of the coverage applies to hail. Farmers in Argentina get insurance against hail. Some of those policies include other risks such as frost or winds, but this is most of what we do. 0.5% of them are multi-risk insurance policies. Here we include other risks such as floods and droughts. We'll also see that there are very few cattle breeding insurance, only 0.033 of the premiums. The main crops for which coverage is achieved is soybean, wheat, corn and sunflower. There is no government subsidy for this. There are some programs such as the one in Corrientes where 100% of the premiums are subsidized. This is the evolution, the acreage under insurance in Argentina. In 2002 there were 11 million hectares, now there is 11 million hectares with insurance coverage, but in the 2013, 2014, 2015, the last growing season, it has always been 18 million hectares. In 12-13, only 60% of the total acreage was protected with an insurance. But we have reached a plateau. The industry is realizing that the coverage has not increased. Insurance coverage has not increased. So we have just heard the previous speaker mention the index insurance. Damage insurance are those the farmers usually contract against hail, and multi-risk insurance. These are damage insurances. They cover direct damage. So when there is an event, an agricultural engineer goes to the farm and assesses the damage, the conditions of the crops, and assesses the damage. But there is another kind of insurance available where we don't go to the farms to assess the damage. Those insurances are called the parametric insurances or the index insurances. And in some agricultural papers, these index insurances are mentioned. These are more advanced insurance policies, and here the compensation we paid is based on an index. For example, for the province of Entre Rios, the Paraná district, Castellano, and in the province of Santa Fe, there is a policy, an index insurance policy, the only one that has been authorized by the Superintendency of Insurances for the time being, and it covered a shortage of rainfall. So we would measure in a meteorological station, the one in Sauce Viejo or the one in Paraná, the rainfall in a critical time, at a critical time for corn, and we made an estimate. So if the rainfall is below 100 millimeters, insurance companies will compensate farmers with a given amount. As the rainfall decreases, the bigger the compensation. But the index is defined, and the damage is defined by an index developed in a clear, consistent, transparent way by an official agency. This is the only index insurance authorized for the time being in Argentina. And now I'm going to talk about Latin America, how these coverages are used in Argentina, how farmers tackle climate risks. In Argentina, with the red circle, we can see that between 50 and 60%, is 60% of the acreage is covered with an insurance. In Uruguay, this includes, in Uruguay we have agriculture and forestry development. In Argentina, forestry development is very limited regarding coverage, insurance coverage I mean. If we talk about Chile, the largest acreage under insurance is that where forestry projects are carried out. And if we go to the north, we go to Mexico, an example of the development of cattle breeding insurance. Cattle breeding insurance in Mexico was based on parametric insurance policies where the pasture is measured. We don't have this in Argentina yet. Sandra has just mentioned this as a goal. The insurance companies are involved in this process, and we want to be a participant in those developments. In Brazil, there is very limited penetration of insurance, of farming insurance. Brazil, they have multi-risk insurance, and less than 10% of the total arable land has insurance policies, and there is a similar figure for cattle breeding. Now, in Brazil, there are 10 insurance companies in the market. In Argentina, there are 25 companies, as I've already said. They have products for agriculture, cattle breeding, and forestry projects. But in Brazil, there are subsidies. They have subsidies. On average, 45% of the cost of insurance is subsidized by the government. If we include the federal and provincial governments or the state governments, such as in the case of São Paulo, 60% of the premium is subsidized. For the insurance industry in Brazil, well, this helped the insurance industry in Brazil to thrive, and they are growing significantly. There, the total amount of premiums is larger than the one we have in Argentina, and they have a special guarantee program. They have catastrophe programs for other kinds of events, droughts, floodings, etc. And we may also say that in Brazil, 10% or less than 10% of the total acreage has an insurance. I also mentioned Mexico, where there are 5 insurance companies, 450 funds. They receive subsidies for $86 million for the premiums and catastrophe programs. And they have, and we see this at the bottom of the slide, an insurance, a multi-risk insurance based on acreage, an index insurance based on vegetation insurance, and index insurance based on rainfall and temperature. Here on this slide, we can see the growth or the increasing number of catastrophic events. In blue, we can see floods from the 70s to 2010. In white, we can see the number of big storms, huge storms, and farmers are facing these climate risks. We also see droughts and forest fires. And we also see days of events of very high temperature. At the bottom, we see the $1 million losses for each event. And in the year 2017, this is our scenario. So farmers have to become aware of this and use more advanced insurances, working together with the insurance industry and the administration. Argentina, at the lower house, there are 3 bills. In 2012, our current Ministry of Agri-Industry submitted 1 bill. There was another bill for the multi-risk farming insurance, and in 2016, another comprehensive system for farming insurance. These are all bills. None of them has been passed yet. The Ministry of Agri-Industry has, however, launched a pilot program mentioned by Sandra to develop an index insurance, a pilot one, addressing farmers that will include droughts and flooding. We, the insurance companies, want to be involved in that pilot test so that all these insurance policies make it to the farmers. When we talked about the Farming Insurance Act, well, the lower house invited us to address them, and the insurance industry told them that as there were many floods, droughts, etc., this was the right time to talk about the farming insurance. It's the right time. We believe that those insurance policies should be the tools that would help to achieve social, cultural, financial, economic stability of farmers. And we believe this is related to what I mentioned earlier on, climate change. Climate change is here to stay. Weather variability is here. There are increasingly stronger storms. There is more damage caused to agriculture because of climate events. Thus, in this scenario, we need a Farming Insurance Act. And which are the goals in this case? To create a set of tools that will enable us to expand the coverage provided by insurance. It's not only insurance against hail. We need insurance against catastrophic events, droughts, flooding, in areas where farmers have no protection nowadays. And we should also expand this to fruit, vegetable orchards, and also regional crops which have no big profitability nowadays. And it's hard for them to get these farming insurances nowadays. Those regional economies, as well as industrial crops, are the backbone of the economy of Argentina. We should also stress and drive the development of insurance for cattle breeding and forestry organizations. We need different kinds of insurances. Multi-risk insurance, as I've already said, and parametric or index insurance and income insurance. In Canada, for example, there is an income insurance which has very good results, where the yield and the price of the grain is considered. In Argentina, we don't have this available yet. We don't have this tool. We need to move along that path to get these tools. The last bullet point is what the Office for Agricultural Risk Management is doing. We should create tools related to coverage. These risk maps that are being developed are really necessary for the insurance industry and for farmers. They will be very useful to design and devise new coverages. The institutional framework, well, we should guarantee that both public organizations and private organizations should work together in fora to discuss and develop those advanced coverages we need. But everybody has to be represented: organizations, farmers, through their associations, insurance companies, reinsurance companies, brokers. All stakeholders should work together to find the solution to the problems posed by climate change nowadays. And finally, this is our challenge. We believe that we should achieve that. We should be able to get modern insurance coverage to all farmers, especially for catastrophic events such as floods and droughts. This is the challenge we all face: the insurance industry, farmers, and the federal government. Thank you very much, and this is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Carlos Comas. And now, Javier Caniggia, the National Director of Agriculture, Emergencies and Disasters in the Agribusiness Ministry of the federal government. He graduated from the Buenos Aires University. Good afternoon. Let me first thank Aapresid for the invitation. I have to talk to about the most difficult part of risk management, but we believe that agriculture emergency system should exist basically when the coverage and insurance market is being developed. I totally agree with my previous presenters. Many times we talk about these famous 500 million that are included in the budget since 2009 and what we can do with that and what we cannot. But I will show how we are trying to efficiently use public funds. We try to reduce vulnerability, social losses, and economic losses. Once the coverage and insurance program was set in motion, the emergency fund is aimed at infrastructure work. What do we currently have? We are always late in assisting farmers. Most of the emergency fund is allocated after the event. Only a very small portion is allocated for prevention. Probably in future, when the law is amended, this should be changed. But I'm not going to discuss the amendments we should introduce to this emergency law. But this is one of the things. The idea is to complete the risk management system through coverage. So what we are working on together with Sandra's team is this development. We are working with the World Bank, and we hope that in the short term we will see some results. Meanwhile, what have we been doing? This is the law we have to abide by, and we have to continue assisting farmers under the provisions of this law. This map shows in blue the recurrence of agricultural recurrences declared at national level, and the other map in orange, the drought recurrences. So we have a tool that allows us to understand which are the most vulnerable areas. We are also developing another tool to be more precise in the assistance we have to provide. This is a registry of farmers in emergency. It was created by law, but it had never been created. We should do this at national level, but the tool is at provincial level. So we are requesting the provinces these emergency lists with a geo-reference to the farmer. So we hope in the mid-term to have this single registry. This will give us a subjective reading of each farmer. It is one more piece of information that we can have to be more precise. When we started end of 2015, early 2016, several provinces were already in emergency situation, and when we requested information, all data were coming separate, and we needed consolidated data to make decisions. We were using public funds. So we developed a monitoring system that basically allows us to overlap different layers of data. We already have some layers, but we couldn't use it in an intelligent way. When we talk about floods, we can talk about the last picture, And now we know how many cattle heads are affected, how many rural roads are affected, how many schools, etc. So this is a core tool for us to define the assistance we should provide. One of the last things we've done is a mobile app called Mira. It is in different app stores. It is not compatible with Apple. So the idea is to collect information from farmers. They can upload their events and they can have their own record of events. This is like providing citizens' involvement. And we will also include municipal and community information. Another tool we are also developing, despite the fact that we had very different criteria with different provinces, because the parameters were very different, the way of uploading the different emergency certificates were very different. So we decided to deliver seminars to standardize the information. So how can we foresee the insurance and coverage market in future? This should be reoriented to infrastructure works. What do we mean? The fund currently doesn't allow us to decide big works, but we can do small public works that have a huge impact on the community. For instance, rural roads. You can see the pictures here. We are also trying to involve citizens. If we are going to decide on a new rural road, we meet with local organizations, with local authorities. We try to have them create local commissions or committees, because farmers know better. Farmers really take care of the land, so we need their involvement. We are being successful in this approach, and we are now better equipped to decide which rural road to fix. This also ensures control, something we cannot ask a third party to do. We have also developed another tool. It is what we call credit subsidy for farmers under emergency. We have different credit lines in the Banco Nación and a subsidized leasing line for municipalities that were under emergency conditions in the past 3 years, for them to buy road machinery to fix rural roads. Usually municipalities do not have a very good credit standing. So what we are doing is providing better requirements or simpler requirements for them. This is what we have been doing. On the left, agriculture emergencies, currently as of July 2017. This has to be crossed with legal issues. Emergencies exist for a period. Some can be extended. Some departments were under emergency till June, and next week we have a National Commission meeting, and probably we will extend that period for those departments. On the right, a map of the different works we've been executing and the different assistances we have been providing. The idea is to complete the work. Sometimes you start or you decide that this work is necessary, but if there's a terrible recurrence there, such as in the Salado Basin, the areas near the Salado, probably you have to wait certain number of months to start the works. That's all. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for listening to me.
Le agradecemos a Javier Caniggia.
Thank you, Javier. And now we have questions and conclusions by the moderator.
Well, are there any questions? I'd like to say once again that you have submitted the questions to phone, telephone, through a WhatsApp message or through an SMS message. The telephone number was on the screen while the presentations were being given. I think this is the right. So as we wait for the questions, I don't know if the speakers would like to add anything to their presentations while we wait for the questions to appear on the screen. We have the first question over there. No, there isn't an application. Somebody asked whether there was an application developed by the government. We don't have an app. The answer is we still are in the beta phase. We don't have an app yet, but we believe it will be very useful to have it in the future. We are developing it right now. So you may look at the current data, but not at historical data, because we are still missing a server that is powerful enough to store all this information, all that information. But I will give you the web address later on by the CBMed, his web, and there you may look at the information that has already been uploaded, but it's not a mobile app yet. This question is, would it be able for CBMed to reduce the insurance costs for farmers? And the answer is, it would be really nice to be able to bring down the insurance costs for farmers. In the insurance market, there is a statement that goes like this: the missing information we need to assess risk is supplemented or is substituted by a higher premium. This will not happen overnight, but I believe that in the long term, as we are better able to quantify risks, the premiums will tend to drop, but it won't happen overnight. It's not that you have a new methodological station coming into operations today and premiums will go down tomorrow. No. That's why I talked about the importance of having long-term information, because insurance premiums are defined based on statistics, damage and impact statistics. So we need this network of stations to be here for the long run. This will help to bring premiums down. This has happened in all other countries in the world, so I believe it will happen in Argentina too. How would it be possible to have access to the OR-card insurance for family agriculture? Well, it was a voluntary participation. We opened a registry of OR-card farmers for farmers having owning less than 1 hectare, and this year Well, this was the approach we used. Of course, it was a voluntary, the participation in this program was voluntary, and now we are analyzing how to implement an expanded program. It's not easy to register small farmers, small orchards, because they are sometimes in areas, in faraway areas, or areas that were far to reach because of the floods in the province of Corrientes, for example. So it was a big effort to reach them. So we are assessing the way to best register small farmers so as to be able to include those that fill in the necessary requirements for the next program. Up to now, we have included farmers having greenhouses in an area smaller than 1 hectare. So we don't know if after we expand from the pilot program, this will be for farmers for 1 hectare or even less. But the target farmer here is a small farmer involved in family agriculture. So in order to access the program, they just had to register. We had a communication campaign in place, and farmers just had to register with the plan. There was no other requirement. Which are the best tools to be developed to provide coverage to farmers? Multi-risk insurance or index insurance? In the future, the best insurance to be bought by farmers, especially against catastrophic events such as flooding and droughts, are index insurances. These have to be developed, and they are not available yet in Argentina. I told you earlier on that it was just that this insurance had only been authorized in the province of Entre Rios for the time being, but we need to work in partnership, private and public sector, to define and devise these index insurances. I like index insurances much better than multi-risk insurances. A multi-risk insurance policy, the ones we have nowadays, just high damages. For example, you have a multi-risk insurance policy and there is hail which causes damage. At the very end, you look at the average yield of the farm. If that average yield is above 12 quintals, there is no compensation paid. So multi-risk insurance in Argentina, where we have damage caused by hail, very often I would not recommend this kind of insurance. Thus, our company, La Segunda, is not offering this kind of insurance, multi-risk insurance, I mean. We believe that in the case of hail, we need a conventional hail insurance. In the case of catastrophic events, we should use index insurance. I'd like to add, after having listened to the presentation on the emergency program, we believe that development of any insurance program is just is supplementary to the Emergency Act. People ask me about this Emergency Act, whether it should be removed or not. I believe it should be enacted. It should be current at all times. I hope your budget is increased so that you may help more farmers, but insurance is always is supplementary to this Emergency Act. While we wait for questions from the audience, I'll ask a question about cattle breeding. What do you think, or what are you planning regarding what Sandra mentioned, or what are the insurance companies think about livestock insurance for beef and dairy cattle, for example? I believe that cattle breeding is a pending issue. I agree with you. For the time being, I believe, or currently I believe it would be necessary to develop drought insurance for forage or feed. I believe that cattle breeding suffered a lot from the 2008 drought, and only right now the cattle inventory is being replenished, so I believe that the drought insurance for forage might be a very good tool. They are not easy to implement. In most countries, they were developed based on green index insurance policies. I believe that might be an approach. It's also true that in countries such as Mexico, where this is quite developed or quite advanced, the farmers or cattle breeders associations buy this forage insurance. It's not bought by individual farmers, but by associations of cattle breeders or farmers. I believe that might be one approach, of course. It's not only droughts that affect cattle. We should think of other risks too. But clearly, droughts are one of the most important elements that affect cattle breeding activities. And farmers also have to incur an additional expense to create or buy forage. There are losses because of early sales of cattle, and I believe there is an area where there is still a lot to do. But in that case, index insurance might be a good tool, I think. Thank you, Sandra. You were...
It was very subtle to mention that cattle farming was reduced due to drought. That was very kind. So I have to draw some conclusions. As a farmer, we know that there are two things we can't handle, the market and the climate. The market, well, we have tools to work with the market. I don't know if they are the best ones or not. As to climate, we are not covered. But I always try to be optimistic, so I believe this is not the arrival, but the departure point. I am convinced of the virtues of public-private partnership. This panel is evidence of that. This is the first time in a conference like this where we can discuss such a difficult topic. At 2 o'clock we met, I believe it was the first, where different insurance companies, the government officials and farmers' organizations were part of the meeting. Of course, we would like to leave this room with some news, but we have to be patient. This is something that will take time. We have the political context to meet all the players in this topic, and I think that if we work together, we will have a suitable result. So enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.